across live, yes, to the United States in New York. This is where we find SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, we understand the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Gutteres, has since issued a statement unpacking what a Trump win means for multilateralism.
Mfunda, let me just read what Antonio Gutteres has said. He says, "I commend the people of the United States of America for their active participation in the democratic process. I congratulate President-elect Donald J. Trump, and I reaffirm my belief that the cooperation between the United States and the United Nations is an essential pillar of international relations. The United Nations stands ready to work constructively with the incoming administration to address the dramatic challenges facing our world." I can tell you this, Mfundo, that's the public face you're getting from the United Nations. I imagine there's a great deal of consternation within these halls here in New York. I walked in and spoke to a very, very senior official earlier this morning, and I said, "How are you feeling today?" And the response was, "I could not even watch." So there's a great deal of concern about what a second Trump presidency would mean for multilateralism. Why? Because of how the first iteration of Donald Trump's presidency went in terms of the relationships with the United Nations in particular. I've just received a commentary from a group called the Crisis Group. It's a think tank that watches multilateralism, global security very closely. And this is what they say, Mfundo. "Elements of a second Trump administration's policy towards the UN are somewhat predictable. The US would likely walk away from those UN frameworks and treaties it rejected during his first outing, including the Paris Climate Change Agreement, the Human Rights Council, and UN mechanisms for cooperation on migration. It would also halt funding for UN activities, such as promoting sexual and reproductive health, which Republican administrations usually dislike." And so we recall, right, the dramatic withdrawal of the Trump administration from the Paris Climate Change Agreement. We remember the dramatic withdrawal from cooperation with the World Health Organization and what that could mean now for global pandemic preparedness. We recall his withdrawal from the Human Rights Council, the Biden administration re-engaging in all those fora during his term. And so one imagines if all the efforts that Biden, the course correction under the Biden administration will now be undone by a second Trump turn. So do not underestimate the Secretary General's concerns here, despite what he says in that statement.
We understand also Liz Cheney has issued a statement.
Liz Cheney, of course, an interesting figure in this debate, right? A conservative Republican, the daughter of Dick Cheney, the vice president to George W. Bush, supporting Harris in the latter stages of a campaign, putting a political capital behind a progressive Democrat, and it did not work out. And so the big question continues to be, when will we actually hear from Kamala Harris, right? We have not heard her concede. We haven't heard anything from the White House, not Joe Biden, not Harris. We understand that Harris will speak around 6 p.m. Eastern time, which is around 1 a.m. Tomorrow morning in Africa, in South Africa. But let me just read you a little bit about what Liz Cheney has said in a statement, and it might inform us about what a concession speech from Kamala Harris might sound like a bit later today. She says our nation's democratic system functioned last night, and we have a new president-elect. All Americans are bound, whether we like the outcome or not, to accept the results of the election. We now have a special responsibility as citizens of the greatest nation on earth to do everything we can to support and defend our Constitution, preserve the rule of law, and ensure that our institutions hold over the coming 4 years. Citizens across this country, our courts, members of the press, and those serving in our federal, state, and local governments must now be the guardrails of our democracy. And one imagines that those are themes you will hear Kamala Harris emphasize today. The institutions of democracy that have to now stand firm, a strong judiciary, the freedom of the press, the freedom of assembly. But there is, of course, a big concern from a Kamala Harris and the Biden administration that Trump represents a threat to the very democracy that she will seek to defend in her concession speech. We certainly look forward to hearing from her.
And then ordinary citizens, how's the mood there this very hour?
Yeah, I mean, it's a country divided. It's a house divided. A lot of concern if you're a Democrat, a lot of concern if you, are concerned about issues like democracy, if you're concerned about Donald's criminal liability that now will just go away, the rule of law, and what his retribution would look like, right? He believes he has been targeted by the Department of Justice. He believes that the legal system in the United States has been weaponized against him. He's been convicted by a jury of his peers in New York City. What does that look like? If you're the DA in Manhattan that pursued that case, what does retribution look like for you? If you're Nancy Pelosi that has been castigating Trump on the airwaves, or, how do you target her? She's just won re-election to a House seat in the state of California. There are just so many unknowns here. So if you're a Democratic supporter and you're in one of the states that went blue, you are feeling very low today. But if you are in one of those red states, right, the red wave has finally arrived. This is a joyous moment for you because you believe the president-elect has been targeted by Democrats, and so you feel very vindicated this morning. So a house divided, two paths here, one very sad, and one very, very joyous.
Indeed, there is one that's very, very joyous. Just on the other side of the screen now, we're just showing some live visuals from Mar-a-Lago. So a number of Trump supporters quite elated today with just that electoral outcome. I'm sure there's going to be quite the celebration beyond this point.
The election is not over yet.
Yes.
We have a projection that's been called by some of the networks, the Associated Press, the CNNs, the ABCs, the NBCs of this world. But we are going to wait for the secretaries of state to certify, in all the states, 50 states, to certify the results. That's a process that is ongoing. They are crossing their T's and dotting their I's.
Yeah.
Then the Electoral College in each state will convene to affirm if it's New York, it's 28 Electoral College votes. If it's California, it's 54 or 19 in Pennsylvania. They then have to affirm and then pledge those Electoral College votes for the winner. Yeah. That certification will then go to the House of Representatives on the date, Mfundo, January 6th, I believe, 2025. Why is January 6th such a number that pops up into the front of your head? Because it's the day the insurrection happened at the Capitol, the last time we did a certification of results when Donald Trump lost against Joe Biden. So that process is expected to unfold on January 6th, and then Donald Trump will be sworn in as the 47th President of the United States on the 20th of January 2025. So still a lot of administration to be done around this election. We don't have a final announcement from an independent electoral commission as we might have in Pretoria in May of this year. No. All the secretaries of state have a responsibility for the elections in their state. They will affirm those elections. It will then go to Congress, and then we have the inauguration on January 20th. The only question I would have is, I wonder which former presidents will be showing up for that.
That is indeed the big question. But I suppose, as you stated now, the media are the ones that have called it for now, but still a long process ahead.